Hello, everybody. It's Glenn Gillis. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Sea Monster. We're an impact gaming company based in Cape Town, South Africa. I'm also the chairperson of something called Games for Change Africa, which looks at how games can change the world. And I'm so excited by today's conversation and looking forward to it enormously. And I'll introduce our guests in a second and tell you the format for the day. But just a reminder, there is a Q&A section, or you can drop them into the chat, doesn't matter. And we definitely want to make this as interactive as possible. So please reach out to us. Just as the questions come to you, feel free to drop them in there. I don't know about you, but I am sick and tired of all the doom and gloom out there. It's just like, I don't know, what is it, Wednesday, the end of August, and it just feels like we're watching the same movie, and I'm privileged. I've got a job, and I have other privileges from my heritage. But I just think about how hopeless the situation must be for so many young people. And I'm not going to belabor the point because I think you're all here because we all recognize that this is a tragedy that is unfolding on our watch. And our generation is going to be judged very harshly by what we do and we don't do. But the good news is that there are incredible things happening. There are people who care. Two of them are on this call today. There are organizations doing great things. And I think that's the tone that we wanted to set today, is to say some of these things happen a little bit below the radar. They don't even get as much validation as we think that they merit. So who I've got on the call with me today, and we'll be having most of the conversation, is Nomthando. So she's head of programs at Alan Gray Orbis Foundation. The game that we built together is called the Alan Gray Entrepreneurship Challenge. It fits as part of a bigger initiative, which you'll come to hear. So if you hear us saying AJEC, what we mean is Alan Gray Entrepreneurship Challenge, which is quite a mouthful. So Nomthando, MBA, strategic communications, and has really been our river guide in terms of making this happen, getting this, our part of it, and I think the program done over the last few years. Also on the call, who just wants to set a little bit of context for us, is Charlene Duncan, who's the head of public affairs and communication. Sure, when I look at her CV, it would take me a long time to get through, but also incredibly impressive roles at UWC. Some of you know about the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation there, groundbreaking work. Also worked at APSA during the Barclays era, worked with WHO and the Gates Foundation. So just incredible depth of experience between our two guests today. But before I hand over to Charlene, just to make some introductory remarks, I just wanted to say congratulations to the two of you and the entire Alan Gray Orbis team, really, foundation team, because yesterday we won a GE award, spelled GE exclamation mark, don't ask. This is a global award, and what it does is it recognizes excellence in educational game design, and we came first. We beat out some of the best, most well-funded initiatives of this kind anywhere in the world. And I think that's our first piece of good news, and maybe the first takeaway is so often we look outside of our country and our continent for solutions. And the commitment that Alan Gray has shown to this continent, to these types of initiatives, I think speaks volumes for why you need a values-based approach to finding our way through some of the most wicked challenges out there. So Charlene, you've just taken on the role of river guide, but you've obviously been involved in the foundation forever. Why is this important? Tell us about this culture of entrepreneurship.
So thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you for the beautiful introductions. We're really excited about that award. And we're really excited about telling our story today. I'm just going to share some introductory remarks. When I think about South Africa and when I think about Africa, I think about our youth, the youngest population in the world. And I think when I think about AGC, I think that should be our biggest advantage. But for far too many young people in South Africa and Africa, the pathway from school to a job just isn't that easy. We can all relate to that as we think about it in the various spaces that we occupy. And when you think about this pathway, you also think about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is often seen as plan B. It's never seen as a career. It's never seen as a powerful first choice. It's never seen as a path to a viable economic environment. So in a sense, when I think about it, it's almost as if we lose the potential before we even begin. And so that's why I think the Alan Gray Entrepreneurship Challenge really, really matters. It plants the seeds early. There's a huge focus in terms of schools. It's done in a very alternative way. Fun, identity, real world challenges. We often talk about experiential learning. And my thoughts are that if we can shift the culture now, we're not just going to be fighting unemployment. We'll unleash a generation which I believe is ready to shape Africa's future. And so I like telling stories. And so I thought about this contextualization in terms of a story. So if you'll allow me, it's not a very long
Of course.
story. It's
No,
probably
you've come to
one
the
minute.
home of stories, so go
Um,
right ahead.
so here goes. The truth is that most young people across, for most young people across Africa, the traditional pathway from school into formal employment just isn't there. Youth unemployment is staggering. I don't have to share those stats. We're all very familiar with it. Our conventional education system doesn't equip young people with the skills, not even the imagination or the creativity to think about and to create alternatives. I think we all have our own experiences of education. And then there's the culture, like you mentioned in the introduction. Too often, entrepreneurship is seen as a plan B, something you turn to when nothing else works. You know, it's never a first option. I've never ever heard anyone say entrepreneurship is, my career plan. Um, and so the question I want to ask is, imagine what that does to a mindset of a generation when you don't think of entrepreneurship as a career. And so for me, that's why this has to start in the classroom. A classroom is where identity is shaped. We can all tell stories and remember fondly a teacher, a school environment, whether it be primary school or high school, where our identities were shaped. And I truly believe that that's where young people begin to believe what's possible for themselves. Sometimes in our own homes, in our own communities, that doesn't happen, but it's within a classroom that shifts. But here's the thing, you can teach entrepreneurship. You can't teach entrepreneurship the way you teach maths or the way you teach history. So it's not a traditional way of translating or relaying skills. It has to be lived. I mentioned experiential learning earlier on. It has to be practical and engaging. You must almost use all of your senses. You must be able to touch and feel and smell. And that's what the Alan Gray Entrepreneurship Challenge offers. It offers that different way of thinking about entrepreneurship. Of course, it's a game, but it's exceptionally designed. And you heard we just won that award. Go and do your research and read about what and why, that is designed in the manner that it has been designed. But it's been designed with educational depth as well. So it's not just an experience. I think it's a symbiotic relationship between design for inclusion and educational depth. It connects learners to real world challenges. It gives them a feedback loop that builds resilience. And resilience is a critical component of what we talk about when we speak about entrepreneurial competencies. It teaches ethical decision making. Again, when we think of our continent, and we think about ethical leadership, ethical decision making, we know what the challenges are around that. It fosters identity and inclusion so that young people can actually see themselves in the story of entrepreneurship. We don't have a lot of role models. We don't have a lot of kind of interaction spaces where we can actually visualize ourselves in spaces. So for me, in closing, it's about planting the seed early, giving it the right conditions and letting it grow. Because if we don't, we risk losing Africa's greatest asset. But if we do, with a tool like AGC, we unlock a generation not just ready to survive the future, but ready to shape it. And so in closing, in Afrikaans, they always say, "Vlek, vlek, my stories eight." So those of you South African, I'm sure you've heard that term. But in closure, for me, it's because in the end, entrepreneurship can never be our plan B. It must be our first choice. And if we unlock the imagination of this generation, we won't only change the unemployment statistics, but we will set tomorrow's history into motion. And I think with that
Wow.
kind of context and that kind of landing, I'm going to hand back to you and to my colleague Nontando, who will talk through some of the mechanics around AGC. Thank you for the opportunity to tell my story.
Yeah, Charlene, that's beautifully said. Beautifully said. And I'm really glad that we're recording this session because, on Sunday, you and I have spoken before about just it is about a new story. It's a story we're telling the world, but I think it's really a story that we're telling ourselves in our heads about what's possible in the world. So let's go back to the beginning of this because you have been there since the very foundation. It is very much your vision that we're executing against as part of this rolling plan. Why a game? I mean, I can only imagine the first time you walked into your exco and said, "I've got an idea, why don't we do this, that?" I mean, Charlene's teed some of it up, but tell us about the broader vision and what brought you to this point.
Thanks, Glenn. And again, thank you for the opportunity for us to share some insights. So interestingly, in terms of how the Ellen Gray Entrepreneurship Challenge came about and why the game, we run a number of programs. We run 3 other programs that are aimed at nurturing entrepreneurs in terms of looking at how we can work with South African youth in terms of harnessing their entrepreneurial potential so that in the long run, they pursue a journey as high impact entrepreneurs. And one of the things that we do quite actively and proactively is engaging with schools because they provide us with the pipeline of the talents that then go through our program. And interestingly, the schools gave us feedback to say, we'd love to support you in recruiting youth with potential. However, the challenge that exists is by the time you come, we haven't had a chance to proficiently explain what entrepreneurship is about and showcase it to our kids, such that when you are recruiting, kids are excited and understand what they're signing up for, as opposed to assuming that we are a bursary program. And so really challenged us to look at how could we give them a tool that they could use in their context, and that being the classroom, that would get the kids to be excited about entrepreneurship. And so as an organization, really reflected in terms of noting that your traditional approach to teaching in the classroom focuses a lot on theory, when entrepreneurship is really about lived experiences and therefore requires a different approach. At the same time, we're looking at if we want this to be engaging because it's not a part of the curriculum, how do we attract them to this platform that they would engage? And so really explored gamification because it creates a safe space for kids to play around, to try new things that they wouldn't on a normal basis. It's less intimidating and also allows them to be uncomfortable in terms of whether they fail, because sometimes they worry about, am I good at understanding the concepts that you're trying to relay to us? And so really using gamification to make it experiential so that they could have the experience of creating those business ventures, but also learn critical concept and feel safe.
I love that. I just want to click on 2 things that you mentioned there. The first is that this is not a campaign. This is not, we're going to try this. You're talking about a long-term pipeline, I heard you say. And so the idea, just to kind of reflect back, is so we're going to, just raise the awareness around entrepreneurship, as you say, talk about what that looks like, and then. So there's a whole systematic strategic view of this. I mean, this is taking it will take you years to see the benefit of doing this. I mean, honestly, in this day and age, in a corporate context where everyone's thinking about the next quarter, how do you stay true to that long-term view? And just give us a little bit of background. I mean, it sounds that this is just embedded in the way that you think, because you're learning and failing too in the work that, you know, it's not like all the things we try are perfect, but yeah, there's something entrepreneurial a little bit about that long-term approach as well. So yeah, tell us more.
Yes, so I think for us, and thank you for raising the entrepreneurial mindset concept, that this really is assisting us in terms of instilling, because we view entrepreneurship as a life skill. So as a corporate, you can invest perhaps in a short-term program or project, but if you're then looking at long-term impact, especially in addressing issues of unemployment in this country, over 60% of our youth are unemployed, and we really need sustainable solutions where we can create businesses that can actually survive. Because yes, you get people who set up businesses, but the problem is around
Failure rates.
how exactly failure rates in South Africa. If I'm not mistaken, less than 15% of businesses survive, the first year. And so for us, it's important to take that long-term view around how do we support an individual such that it doesn't matter which environment or type of business they're operating, they can see it through in the long term. And success, when done properly as well, doesn't take forever. We've already started seeing success in AJAC beyond the awards. I always love sharing the story of one of the guys young males who entered AJAC a couple of years ago. He first started when he was grade 10. He didn't win. Came back again when he was in grade 11. Didn't win because a part of the program is you're explaining that it's not just a campaign, there'd be the element where it's the online game. Then from there, we would encourage them to pitch their business ideas so that we can see if they've learned and taken out lessons from the online game. And so the pitching competitions allows them to showcase what they have learned inside the game. So grade 11, he didn't win the pitching competition. And in grade 12, because entrepreneurship is about collaboration and maximizing your networks as well, he went back to his schoolmates, asked them to join his business, and pitched with his schoolmates a company called Joy of Media that produces content for mainstream media who aren't able, or perhaps are not aligned in terms of producing content that's appropriate for youth. They currently produce content for SuperSport. And they're in university at the moment, and they run a business that actually generates an income and is sustainable. And those are the type of entrepreneurs that we are looking at in terms of people who can create businesses that can last for years. I mean, these guys are in university and already running a professional business just from having the opportunity to showcase and prove that they're capable.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love that story, and multiply that by 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 and problem solved. So clarity of vision, clarity of purpose, details to follow, basically. Like we'll figure the rest out because we'll try things systematically and fail. Because yeah, another definition of a game is basically systematic failure. And we look at the data on some of the kids who played this, and I mean, they're kids who played this hundreds of times, or as I like to say, they basically failed 199 times and succeeded once. Like there's nothing else in the world that would bring you back again and again and again, keep you motivated to kind of try new strategies. And as you say, that then translates into the real world, as your example elegantly says. The other thing that you were talking about is the teacher in all of this, and it's so easy for us to make something that works for the teacher but doesn't for the kids, or works for the kids but doesn't for the teacher. And, you do a lot of work, I know, with the Department of Basic Education, but you're also got boots on the ground, school by school. And I'm not just talking about upper end schools. You're you're out there really seeing the best and worst that this country has to offer. But I'm gonna make a very stereotypical conversation here about teachers, and that is that they maybe the opposite of entrepreneurial in a sense. They went to school, they went studied, they went back into a very structured environment. Of course, I understand this is a generalization, so apologies, please. But you're also asking them to talk about something that they might not be knowledgeable about. We're bringing in digital devices into this thing, and then so there's that part to my question. But the second part to it is structured play is kind of hard to get right, because people can go way off the direction here. So, I mean, maybe we can talk a little bit about that aspect of it, because you want to put some guardrails in place in the classroom, but then how do you kind of do that? So, yeah, just some of your experiences with teachers, with the DBE, what's standing out for you?
I must say that we have been very fortunate to have the support of the Department of Education and also the teacher unions, and voluntarily so, because they've understood the need that we face as a country. And we implement in partnership with the teacher unions, teacher training sessions where we take them through the game. Because to your point, you can't expect a teacher to support a child in the classroom when they themselves don't understand the game itself. And so we provide training to teachers so that one, they understand the basic concept of entrepreneurship, but two, then understand how better to support their learners in the classroom. And we would make them during the training play the game themselves, so that if there are challenges or nuances that they're picking up, they're able then to share those with us, and we can assist them to better address those issues, or perhaps they then take those lessons to the classroom itself. But importantly, in terms of supporting structured learning through gaming as well, has been developing different content materials that teachers can use in the classroom to support the online game itself. So as an example, we have developed a Startup Shuffle, which is a card game, and it has different concepts that mirror the online game in terms of, how you would play a 30 seconds game. You would be challenged through Startup Shuffle, as an example, to start an eco business in a specific sector. And then you're able, as a learner, to come up and present ideas that help teachers not to have the burden of creating content for their classroom from scratch, because then that also affects issues of alignment with the Department of Education's curriculum statement. We also have teacher lesson plans in the areas of EMS and LO at the moment. We're looking at expanding those lessons plans to areas such as mathematics and accounting. Government is currently looking at enhancing its curriculum and really looking at how it can enrich or better incorporate entrepreneurship education. And so they're looking at how they can bring it into the existing subject areas so that it doesn't overburden the teacher and the child in terms of then classroom time that would be required. And hence the approach for the teacher lessons plans. But we've made sure that those are also aligned to the department's curriculum statement, because we don't want to find ourselves in a situation where the departments and the teacher unions and teachers themselves don't see the relevance in pursuing these if they don't speak to assisting them to better achieve their duties as expected. And so we've taken a multi-pronged approach in terms of enabling that long-term journey with them, so that it's not a once-off thing where they play the game perhaps for a month or during the competition period and they don't come back, but looking at resources that empower the teacher to engage learners in the classroom.
Wow, that's amazing. And I definitely learned something there. Again, two things that kind of standing out for me. You got the teachers' unions on board. I mean, that I talk about throwing down solid foundations. That's a massive achievement, and I think it also speaks to the partnership mentality that you've got in this thing. Again, to your example about we've all got to come together and bring our different perspectives on it. You know, so often we think, okay, it's government's job to do this, or corporate's job to do that, but I'll come back to that partnerships thing at the end. But just wanted to say, for me, I think that relationship with the department itself, but I think particularly with the teachers union, and I think they see it. I mean, if you come in there and you watch and observe and you see the realities in these classrooms, because they stress that teachers have got so much admin to do. I mean, we know what their challenges are. And yet you're saying, look, I can make your day job easier, and I will definitely at least give you what you need in terms of the curriculum and obviously the exams and things that go with that kind of process, a tick. But I'm going to give you the power, but doing it in a way that is empowering you, because who wouldn't like want to play a silly little card game? It isn't actually that silly. Actually, it's very well designed and documented. We didn't do it, by the way. I'm not pitching us, but I'm saying it's a good example of how even the simplest game mechanics can be used to kind of take a lot of the stress and the pressure out of these things, because everybody has got some lived experience about how silly families and friends get around a board game of some kind or a card game, and you're just tapping into that silliness or that light sort of mentality, which really primes the mind. I mean, there's science behind all of this, isn't there? Like, it's priming the mind. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of call out. Do you want to comment on that? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, to jump into that in terms of the science as well behind gaming. Another example I'll give, I have a colleague whose son at some point was struggling with maths, and he was getting tutoring and it was just not happening. Fortunately for her, he's somebody who's a gamer, YouTuber, and so forth. And the one time I challenged her to say, but like, you're getting traditional forms of tutoring for him, and that's not speaking to him. He's not that kind of child who's engaged in that manner. He's more IT sort of like focused if you're trying to get his attention. And I had challenged her to say, but if you go on YouTube, there are different platforms and tools online that you can find that speak to him, as opposed to forcing him to learn through traditional tutoring. Because when he stands in front of a tutor or perhaps a teacher, his first thing is, from past experiences, I'm not smart, I'm not going to get this right. But you put him in front of a computer, he's not expecting learning to happen. He thinks he's having fun, and he thinks he's in control of the content and the pace at which he's consuming that content. He moved from a kid that was struggling to get like 40% to a kid who's now performing above 70%, because learning happened in a way that spoke to him, that was less intimidating. And that gamification actually enables learners and teachers to be able to experience, because even from a teacher perspective, if you're using a card game to teach concepts, and they've got questions that you can pose to your learners, it feels less intimidating, in terms of, it's not about you, the teacher, understanding everything that there is about entrepreneurship, but probing your learners so that they're able to unpack and look at the world differently.
And I love that. Have you come across this know, do, be framework for learning? And I'm not an expert in this. Luckily, we do have some, and obviously Alan Gray, Orbis Foundation, and AJEC does a lot. But so the way that schooling and teaching works is, I'm going to teach you a whole bunch of content, so you're going to know something. And then the idea is, can you do something with that? But ultimately, of course, what we want you to do is be able to extract that and then understand the core principles, so that you can just be that thing. Because I don't really care what you know, I care really about the behaviors that you kind of exhibit. But it just strikes me as we're chatting that actually games are almost the other way around. It's almost be, do, know. I remember from some of the user testing that we did, we were chatting to a kid and we were talking about supply and demand, and you can go and check the games out. We can have a chat a bit about how it works. But basically, they're customers walking past, and you've got to choose items and set prices and so on. And this one kid turns around and says, "Oh, you know that thing's called price elasticity of demand." I'm like, yeah, I do know that from somewhere deep in my first days of economics 101 at varsity. And I'm like, how do you know what that thing is called? And his answer was that I've been doing and trying all of these different strategies to get the pricing right so I could maximum the profitability and manage my reputation on the other side and all the things that were built into the game. And then I went to YouTube and I'm like, how do you, so what is this thing I'm trying to do? You know, and of course, there's a YouTube video that comes back and it says, oh, by the way, that thing's called price elasticity of demand, and it talks to the relationship between price and quantity. And that to me was just, you reminded me, just such a brilliant example of how we're almost inverting the pyramid here. And you know, you think about games like Minecraft or Roblox or any game actually, it's definitely teaching you something, but that learning isn't obvious. You know, there isn't often even a tutorial. You like jump into the game, you run around, you try and figure some things out, and before you know it, you've been onboarded and you're off to the races. And then we do like this idea of saying, okay, Nonthanda, congratulations, you just got to the end of level 2. By the way, here are the names of some of those behaviors that you've kind of exhibited. And I think that takes the pressure off, you know, to your example of the kids, to the things that are happening in that classroom. Because the alternative is we're going to spend a lifetime trying to explain to you what entrepreneurship is based on what? You know, socio-emotional, you need resilience. Okay, great, I need resilience. What does that actually mean? No. You played the game 500 times. That's resilience. Tick, move on. Next, you don't need to talk to that person about that point. What are some of the other things that sort of jump out just as we sort of drop down into the game itself in terms of the real world business stuff? How's that? What stood out for you in some of those things that were built into the game?
So I think it's the skills that the students are gaining and some of the evidence that we have observed around that. We've seen a powerful mix of hard and soft skills being developed through playing the game. And as you're talking, you're reminding me of one of the reports that we got from some of your team members during the testing, where some of the learners even had a spreadsheet to try and track and figure out what's the best way to play the game and their pricing strategies and so forth. And so some of the hard sort of like skills that they are building is around financial literacy because they're seeing real life impact in terms of the decisions that they're making around finances, you know, how you pay your staff, how you source your products and so forth, and them just making that connection. Also, in terms of marketing basics, because one of the things I must say that I really love the most about the game is just how realistic it is about what it takes to set up a business and the different parts of setting up a business that you have to consider. So, a child who's setting up a business has the option of, for instance, placing adverts so that they can attract individuals to come into their stall and buy their products. And so they need to think about those elements in terms of the direct impact of marketing on their business and the balancing thereof. But also in terms of strategic thinking, because again, you need to think about your reputation in terms of if you don't pay your staff on time, then they're not working, they're on strike. What does it mean from my ability then to make money if my staff is not selling products and so forth? So that is quite important and gives the learner a real life experience of the kind of thinking that they need to consider and have. But on the softer side, issues of resilience that we have spoken about,
Mm.
issues of collaboration, especially looking at the guys who play over and over again, because they'll go ask their friends, what are you learning? You know, what is it that you're doing right that I'm not doing? And so, like, really creating that curiosity that they need in order to thrive, not just as entrepreneurs, but as people. I mean, in the workplace, if you're not curious, you're going to get left behind, and you'll see your peers perhaps progressing in certain areas because they have that innate curiosity.
Yeah.
Also issues of decision making, because the whole time it's a pressurized environment where the people are walking past your shop and you need to make decisions about, do I have enough stock? Am I marketing? Is my price range right? Am I making ethical decisions in terms of my business, in terms of sourcing products that are made ethically versus, you know, somebody who's not producing them ethically? And those are just, you know, the basics that I think are important for any human being to understand, no matter whether they end up with a corporate job or an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I want to come back to that last point in a moment, but I'm going to start next year in the update. We're going to make it real, like real world. You're going to start with spending 3 hours in a queue outside SARS to get all your registrations done. Then the guys will be properly battle hardened and ready for the real world, of course. But I do like what you're talking about there. You know, it's systems. You're talking about systems of interrelated things, you know, and yeah, you can't teach marketing in the vacuum from HR issues and we do, you know, we break things down and we hope that you put those pieces of knowledge together back in a way that you can actually apply them. But again, we're almost doing it exactly the opposite way around here. Games are really good at that. They're really good at the relationship between systems. I mean, think about the thrilling corporate compliance training that you go through. No comment necessary. But, you know, we try and learn the principles of governance and these things in isolation, but that's not the way it plays out in your life. These things come at you fast and furious, and you've got to choose your own adventure. And you're, oops, okay, I'm going down a slippery path. Let me come back, and you go back onto that, you know, because that's how all things work. It's these things happen in different ways. Which skill do I need when? And yeah, which body of knowledge do I need to draw on when I'm looking at something? I think those are things that honestly, there's nothing that comes close to being able to provide that interconnected learning thing like a game or a simulation does. The other comment I wanted to make is, you know, one game, many different lenses here, isn't it? Because hey, I'm actually interested about those staff when they're grumpy. Like, why are they not motivated? What's going on there? Hang on, do you know about all the careers that you can have in learning and development and HR and training? I'm really interested in why some of those ads are working and why they're not. Okay. And so if you think about it that way, we could equally have a whole series of conversations about career choices. So not only are you building the socio-emotional skills that you rightly say are at the core of all of this, but at the same time, what you're doing is you're teeing up. Hang on, if you've got high levels of empathy and this, you might very well be suited to a career in that area. And I think that's just amazing. So one asset leveraged in different contexts, used again and again, play that thing over many years. Obviously, it's got its specific place and its core target market, but it's almost ageless. I mean, anybody could basically play it from a 6 or 8 year old to me, you know, to try and figure out how to run a business in South Africa. So I'm still trying, I'm learning every day. But I wanted to just clear that the last point that you made, and maybe this talks to back kind of where we started. We've got about 5 or so minutes just before we open up for questions. But, you know, you spoke about this idea that Charlene also hinted at the beginning, and that was that not everybody's actually born to be an entrepreneur, but having this mindset will work everywhere. Just talk a little bit about that, and then maybe link that into this, yeah, how this whole campaign works and where people can start to get involved in this process. So a two-pronged question for you.
So, Glenn, for us, the term that we use is entrepreneurship, a human right, because we believe that it opens up your way of thinking and looking at problems differently. And again, using the game as an example, there's one of the employees, I don't know when was the last time you've played it, I forget her name now, who always wants to take leave. And on top of that, always wants an increase in the game, and you have to make decisions around how you're going to handle that employee. In the workplace, as a manager, as an example, those are the things that you deal with on a daily. You don't have to like have your own business to be responsible for staff in your career, whichever path that you choose. There are problems that will arise no matter which level you are within the organization. You could be at reception and the phone perhaps there's a problem of sorts in terms of transferring it to the people that are usually being called, and being entrepreneurial around how best may we handle the challenge in terms of perhaps engaging with your IT team or your facilities team around the challenge that you're facing, because they're not the ones who are answering the phone and perhaps it's not a priority to them. But if you're able to help them solution around how they could go about fixing that problem, you add value to your organization. We've had some of our fellows who are in corporates, who are assisting corporates to come up with solutions that assist communities that have financial difficulties. We had a fellow, if I'm not mistaken, who assisted the organization where she was working at the time with a counseling a service that was cheap for people who didn't have medical aid. So, for instance, for 50 rands, instead of paying perhaps 600 and above, you could have a session with a therapist so that you would be able to address issues related to psychosocial challenges that you may be experiencing. And she's in corporate. We had another fellow as well who was in discovery, assisted them as well with launching a service that initially was not available. I think even our chairperson here at the foundation used to be with Discovery, and he founded Discovery Insure, and he founded it, you know, as a part of Discovery. And so it's really looking at, as an individual, and especially if we're competing globally, there are a lot of challenges that we're facing as South Africa. There's a lot of spotlight on South Africa. The US president has facilitated, you know, some of the attention in terms of what we have been observing, you know, defunding USAID and really challenging us as Africans, how we come up with our own solutions as opposed to relying on donor funding. And so if we are to create, whether it's entrepreneurs or whether it's corporates, we need people who can think entrepreneurially, who are not going to be stuck on the problem, who are not waiting for government to do something about the problem, but can take the initiative to address the critical issues that are in the way of us progressing, whether from an employment, infrastructure, and so forth perspective. So when we think about entrepreneurship in that matter, that it's about being productive, it's about adding value to society, then you look at things a bit differently. And for us, that's why we want to reach as many youth as possible, because if you've got a cabinet that is entrepreneurial, perhaps some of South Africa's issues can be addressed a bit more efficiently and faster. And so how we collaborate and come together in terms of ensuring that we future-proof our youth so that they can help us move forward. And to what was said earlier, and I can't remember whether it was you or Charlene, we will be judged harshly what we did. And so this provides us an opportunity to really empower our youth so that they can be productive?
Sure. I think everyone's going to need to re-listen to that, because I think there's a lot in very, very powerful insights in that. I'm going to come back to you now in a sec on the question about AGOF and the programs more generally, and then the partnership opportunity for people listening in. But I do want to just acknowledge, design thinking is what you're talking about in some respects there, about how do you see a gap? How do you make sure that the product that you're developing, whether you, as you say, work in a big company or seeing a gap in the market or whatever it might be, starts with empathy. It starts with being able to put yourself in the shoes of a customer or person, understand the pain that they might be experiencing, and then designing from that point backwards. So often we see people, oh, look at AI and this incredible technology and blah, blah, blah. And we were like, whatever. I mean, we AI all over here. But what we're always doing is putting the user at the center of that experience and making sure that we're addressing an issue that is real for them and values their time. And again, I guess this is what's called common human decency in a world where it often is lacking. So, yeah, you're learning it in the game, you're learning it part of the entrepreneurship mindset. Your example of us all understanding what the receptionist must go through on a daily basis, and all the queries and demands that are coming to that person. It's just empathy in different forms. But it's not just about being kind to each other, although I hope it is at least that. It's also about seeing this as this opportunity to think about it from a business perspective and say, okay, what's the pain? Where's the gap? Where's the hassle in this whole thing? And so I just wanted to really acknowledge that and remind everybody that we don't even really like the term gamification. We use it as a shorthand because ultimately it's really just human-centered design that we're talking about here, just honoring each other. Again, something that Africa has as part of its culture and should just remember and promote everywhere. Anyway, don't get me started. I'm going to need a glass of wine in a minute if I don't shut up. But okay, so Sandra, where does this fit in terms of the Alan Gray Orbis Foundation suite of programs? And just as we wrap up, what are the opportunities for partnership that you see in all of this?
No, so in terms of the bigger picture at the foundation has a broader ecosystem, from our high school scholarship program to our fellowship program, which services university students. We've recently launched and are piloting a postgraduate fellowship that is targeting students who are currently enrolled for postgraduate studies. And also then we have our association, which is our alumni program. As an organization, we are an organization that provides entrepreneurship, education, and development. And so all of our programs seek to address that. And sometimes people think we run scholarships, and we don't run the traditional scholarships. We address issues of education because we understand inequality in South Africa and how education itself can assist the entrepreneurs in terms of being able to develop business ideas that are scalable and models that are complex and can create the jobs that we're looking at our participants creating. And so with our scholarship program, it really targets kids. We recruit them from when they're in grade 6, so about 11, wow. 12, for onboarding for our high school program. We have partner placement schools because a big focus around for us as well is access to quality education. And so would place those kids at those schools whilst then implementing a parallel entrepreneurship education curriculum that is appropriate to their age group. And really focusing on issues or pillars related to personal mastery, managerial skills, and also building entrepreneurial competencies. The university program mirrors that. It's just that from a content perspective, it's more deeper and advanced to match again the age group at that level. What is exciting as well with the university program, is that we're starting to see some of our kids who are still in university, but establishing and actually starting businesses that are progressing. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, we currently have over 120 businesses that are set, or individuals rather, that have set up businesses whilst in
Wow.
university currently. So not that they
Okay.
graduated,
So
they
the
currently
hassle is real.
Exactly. And with the postgraduate fellowship as well, we're piloting it with 30 individuals at the moment, just looking at how can we create an accelerated experience for individuals who have already passed the university phase, and accelerating them into entrepreneurship, and really looking forward to the lessons that will come from it. With the
Amazing.
association just being a community of alumni, again, looking at how do we facilitate them into entrepreneurship. Some of them are in corporate. How do we support them around career advice, issues of leadership support, and then venture and capital support for those that go into entrepreneurship. So
Wow.
it's a
Full
whole
life cycle.
full circle, yeah, ecosystem.
Yeah, beautiful. So what's missing? I mean, and where's the opportunity to partner?
So no single organization can solve issues of youth unemployment on its own. Yes, the impact that we're making is substantive, but we'd like to explore opportunities around how do we maximize and leverage the lessons that we've learned with like-minded organizations, so that we can expand our opportunities to more South African youth. So whether it's an organization that runs a traditional bursary program, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is the wraparound support for the individuals that we work with. How do we partner with you to provide that wraparound support and entrepreneurship education, so that the pool of entrepreneurial pipeline can be expanded beyond what we can fund as an organization?
Right.
There are sometimes also instances where organizations don't have the capacity to implement their own programs, and so work with some of our partners to just help from an implementation perspective. But from an Asia perspective, we're really looking at how to meaningfully impact schools and democratize access to entrepreneurship education. We have over 300,000 gameplays this year alone, and the year is not
Wow.
over. We've got about
Wow.
40,000 kids that are registered. Our target is 80,000. How do we partner with other organizations where we potentially can create a solution that works for all of us? If you're trying to address issues of financial literacy, why don't you partner with us so that you don't have to start from
Exactly.
scratch? So it's really looking at, as an ecosystem, can we take a complementary approach? Can we share resources? Can we share expertise so that South African youth can benefit?
Yeah, exactly. And I just think, I just look at the game as it exists. Forget about the fuller life cycle that you spoke about. Although there's all those lessons that can be shared both ways, because people will have also had their own experiences. If you're a big retailer and you want to think about your employees of the future, your teams of the future, your customers of the future, what are you doing? Why are we not aligning around that? If you're a food manufacturer, if you're manufacturing anything, I mean, literally, there's no part of the economy. And just before we came on air today, we were just also chatting about that corporate South Africa has got more cash on its balance sheet than at any time in history. And I get it. AI this and here, there, and Trump and whatever. But I can tell you what, if we don't invest wisely, as I think Nontanda, you've said, and it's not risky. It's not like each of these is calculated, and if everyone thinks, oh, only Alan Gray can do this because of the size of the organization, I can promise you, we turn over every cent 10 times. We do, they do. So it's lots of little will make a lot on this, and I think it's back to that point about we're going to be judged harshly by history and frankly by your kids. So not to put too fine a point on it, but it is an absolute crisis, and we do need to overreact, and it just shows that a considered, risk-appropriate process can actually start to yield very real results. So we've got a 5 minutes left, and I just wanted to check if there was anybody out there who wanted to come in at this point and drop any questions. Bella is kindly moderating. She's the marketing lead at Sea Monster. Bella, is there anything in the chat that's come up, or see there's a question here?
I wanted to just read
Yes.
out the question because I think it's linked to what you and Ntando were speaking about. So it really speaks to, what's next for the plan of AJEC. I mean, what it's accomplished so far is incredible. And the suggestion here is that it would be really interesting to be able to connect the game with real life experiences in an actual business, within their community. And do you think that this would be possible to, broaden school communities to create these links? And if so, what would you need to make that happen? Maybe also speaking to the kinds of partnerships that you're looking for.
No, absolutely. So that is already taking place from a business pitching competition element of AJAC, and we're looking at how do we expand that, because we challenge the learners to say, come up with solutions or identify challenges that are relevant to your generation and the solutions that you want to provide. So whether it's a local business that's perhaps in your community that's trying to solve a problem and you're looking at how to support and enhance potentially or come up with solutions around how that could work, or perhaps coming up with your own other problem and solution. And for us, that is the big thing that we're trying to chase, because it's not just learning for learning, but we want you to actually take action in your communities and bring that to life. So please do engage us. We'll drop or share our email details so that you can be in contact with us. And we don't like to be prescriptive as well around how partnerships should happen, because often when we engage with people, conversations evolve, and we don't want to close off opportunities to partner with others because we've been specific around, oh, we need financial resources, or maybe we need mentors, or this and that. It differs according to where the conversations go and the identified need that might have been brought up, which we might actually not have even thought of by another stakeholder.
Yeah, I think that's really good to hear. I mean, inclusive in the word, and you really mean it. And it's not necessarily about your brand or my brand. I mean, there's space in the sun for all of us in this thing. So both from a sort of corporate reputation perspective, but also from a financial perspective. And just as you're talking, again, I just think about the opportunity around TVET colleges. That was just what popped into my mind. The people who are probably actually going to have jobs in the AI revolution, and how difficult it has been for us as a society to really set those people up, and it just seems to me like none of us really learned business, the real business of business. Even people who studied business, like I did, that was all what was written in the book. It's all real practical things. And I think about that whole generation of young people coming through those TVET colleges and how critical it is. So if anybody's interested in that piece, that's something we're very, very passionate about. Equipping and let's call it reindustrializing the country, because that's kind of what we need to do. We're going to need engineers and plumbers and everything, all of those kinds of things. So yes, I think this is an open call. I hope the share has been useful. Thank you for your openness and your willingness to share the lessons, both good and bad, and many more to come. I know your offer to see, to chat to everybody out there. So if you're on the call or anybody, please reach out to us, or obviously directly to Ntando. Charlene as well, I'm sure is a huge driver of partnerships and vision of where that's going to go. So now you know these are they, and they're committed to doing this. And we do. We need to get our acts together. You know, time is passing, and yes, it is the end of August. Well, what have we done to really move the needle to solve these systemic issues? And we did that by playing. It's crazy. We just went back to one of the most human things that we all do as kids, and then suddenly we seem to forget, and that is structured play teaches humans how to do and navigate and be, and yeah, everything from empathy to, you know, elasticity of demand and everything in between. So yeah, closing word from you, Nintendo. You happy to close it out?
Yes, it's really just an invitation, I think, to everyone out there. We don't have all of the solutions, and we don't try to act like we've got all of the solutions. We really are on a journey in terms of looking at how we can be a part of a bigger ecosystem that's really wanting to empower and future-proof youth. And so if you're an organization out there, no matter the size, and you're interested in terms of looking at how you can join us or how we can complement each other on our respective journeys, we really would like to invite you to be open to that, and for us to look at how we position our youth to be able to compete globally, and that we don't let them down.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. So thank you to everybody for joining us for your lunch. I hope it was interesting. Thank you, Charlene, for setting the context, and thank you, Nontanda, for the conversation. It was amazing, and looking forward to many more years together. So yeah, thanks to everyone. Thanks, Charlene. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Have a good one. Thanks,
Cheers.
everyone. Bye.